Hello everyone, and χαράσιμη και ειρήνη, grace to you and peace. In this video we're going to look at what it means to preach the gospel, as it says in Mark chapter 16, verse 15. Και εἶπεν αὐτοῖς πορευθέντες εις τόν κόσμον ՀΑΠΑΝΤΑ, κηρύξατε το εὐαγγέλιον πάσῃ τη κτίσει. And he said to them, going into all the world, preach the gospel to all creation. Now preach, or κηρύξατε, is the aorist active imperative second person plural of the verb κηρύσω. Now this word describes a well-known function in the ancient world, that of the herald. So κηρύσω is defined as to herald, proclaim, preach, or announce a message publicly and with conviction and persuasion. We no longer have heralds in the modern world, and the English translation to preach does not bring out the meaning of the Greek. So we need to drill down on the word to get a better understanding of what it means and how we are to do it. So let's take some examples of what it means, this word means, both from biblical and extra-biblical sources. Let's start with Matthew 12:41. The men of Nineveh will stand up with this generation at the judgment and will condemn it, because they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here. Preaching here is kyrigma, which is a noun form of kyriso. So let's take a look and see what the kyrigma of Jonah was. Jonah 3:2. Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and proclaim to it the proclamation which I am going to tell you. In the LXX, or Septuagint, which is a 3rd century BC translation of the Hebrew Old Testament scriptures into Greek, we find that proclaim is our word kyriso, and proclamation is our noun kyrigma. What was Jonah's kyrigma, or proclamation? We find that in Jonah 3, verses 4 through 5. Then Jonah began to go throughout the city, one day's walk, and he cried out and he said, Yet 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Then the people of Nineveh believed in God, and they called a fast and put on sackcloth, from the greatest to the least of them. So we see Jonah's kyrigma in verse 4, Yet 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. So he went throughout the city and he was crying out, he was proclaiming, Yet 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Yet 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Yet 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. And we see that the people reacted positively to this kyrigma, or proclamation, because they believed in God and called a fast and put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them to the least of them. They believed Jonah's kyrigma, or proclamation. Our second example is from the patristic writing, the Martyrdom of Polycarp, which was written approximately 160 AD. Very interesting writing if you haven't read it. And the scene here is that Polycarp, an aged Christian, is in a Roman stadium where Christians are being forced to either deny the faith or else be executed. And chapter 12, verse 1 reads, Saying these things and more besides, he, Polycarp, was inspired with courage and joy. And his countenance was filled with grace, so that not only did it not drop in dismay at the things which were being said to him, but on the contrary, the proconsul was astounded and sent his own herald, kyrix, to proclaim, kyriso, 3 times in the midst of the stadium, Polycarp hath confessed himself to be a Christian. The word for herald here is kyrix, which is another noun form of kyriso. So we see the kyrix proclaiming, kyriso, 3 times. Polycarp hath confessed himself to be a Christian. Polycarp hath confessed himself to be a Christian. Polycarp hath confessed himself to be a Christian. And our third example is from Xenophon's Anabasis, a secular Greek writing from the 4th century BC. And in 3 4:36 we read, when the Greeks became aware that they were desirous of withdrawing and were passing the word along, the order to pack up the luggage was proclaimed, kiriso, to the Greek troops within the hearing of the enemy. So the herald went throughout the troops and proclaimed, "Pack up the luggage! Pack up the luggage! Pack up the luggage!" Our fourth example is that of Noah. And in 2 Peter 2, verse 5, we read, "And did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a preacher, kyrix, of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly." So what was Noah's proclamation? We see it in Hebrews 11:7, which reads, "By faith Noah, being warned by God about things not yet seen, in reverence prepared an ark for the salvation of his household, by which he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness which is according to faith." Noah's proclamation seems to have been his act of building the ark. And we can imagine that when people asked him why he was building a huge boat in the middle of nowhere, not near any water, that he probably gave them an admonition similar to what we find in the Pirkei of Rabbi Eliezer, which has, "Be turned from your evil ways and works, lest the waters of the flood come upon you, and cut off all seed of the children of men." So now that we have a good understanding of the verb kiriso, along with the noun forms kyrix, herald, and kerygma, proclamation, let's take a look at what we are to proclaim, which is to evangellion. And this is the word angelia, or message, with the EU prefix, or ev, meaning good. Thus, the good message, or the gospel. John sums up the gospel very succinctly in John chapter 20, verse 31. "But these have been written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you might have life through his name." So we have 3 parts here. First, Jesus is the Christ, or O Christos, the promised Messiah of the Old Testament. And second, that Jesus is the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, who became flesh and dwelt among us, as it says in John chapter 1, verses 1 and 14. "In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth." And thirdly, that salvation is only through faith in Jesus Christ, as it says in Acts 4:12, "And there is salvation in no one else, there is no other name under heaven that has been given among men, by which we must be saved." So therefore we are to be heralds, kyrix, and we are to herald, kyriso, proclaim, preach, announce our proclamation, kerygma, publicly to a lost and dying world. And with conviction and persuasion, and our proclamation is to evanggelion, the gospel, the good message, that the promised Messiah, God in the flesh, is Jesus Christ, and that salvation is through faith in him. And we are to make this proclamation both with words as Jonah did, and with actions as Noah did. As Francis of Assisi said, "Preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words." Thank you, and Evcharisto.